While the clock ticked, Chapter 4. Frank glanced in the rearview mirror at the trailing car, which was some distance behind. "We'll test to find out if he's really after us." He braked the convertible, slowing quickly. For a moment the strange headlights rushed nearer, then dropped back. The other car was keeping the same speed as the Hardys were. "Okay," said Frank with determination. "We'll settle this right now." Quickly he swung off the road and stopped. The two boys sat watching, with the car top down. An ordinary-looking sedan rolled toward them. Watching it approach, Joe caught sight of a high aerial at the back. "Police!" he announced with a surprised laugh. In a moment, the brothers were looking into the round, cheerful face of Officer Callahan of the Bayport Police Department. The officer shook his head in mock disgust. "I was just saying to Tomlin here," he remarked, that's a suspicious car speeding out to Willow Road. So it's you, Hardys, is it? And us expecting a pair of fleeing harbor thieves." "Don't think we're any happier than you are about it," Joe joked in return. "We thought you were a couple of crooks following us." "Harbor thieves still busy?" Frank asked. "We met Mike DeSalvo chasing them this morning." "Busy?" Officer Tomlin exclaimed. "Day and night they're busy, and not a lead on them yet, except that big black car. We're sure they've given it up using it now, so we have no lead. For that reason, we're tailing everything we see on this road." At that moment, a large, cream-colored sedan pulled around the unmarked police cruiser and roared into the country. "Here we go," barked Callahan, as Tomlin pulled away to pursue the car. "Maybe that's the one." "Good luck," the Hardys called. Frank and Joe now noticed that the moon had been obscured by clouds. The grounds of the nearby estates were completely dark. The air had become hot and sticky. "It's going to storm," said Frank. "We'd better get going." As though in answer to his remark, there came a faraway rumble. The boys decided to walk to the Purdy place, since it was only a quarter of a mile away, and they would attract less attention. After switching off their parking lights and putting up the convertible's top, the young detectives walked along the dark road. Soon they came to the high wall of the Purdy estate. They skirted it until they reached the big wooden gate. It was open. "Wait," said Frank in a low voice. "We closed that gate this morning. Somebody's been here since then and might still be around." "The driveway may be watched," Joe warned. "We'd better find some other way in." They walked back a distance to a place where the wall was heavily overgrown. "Shall we climb it?" Joe whispered, testing the vines with a pole. "No, I had a look at that wall this morning. There are pieces of old, jagged, broken glass all along the top. Apparently Jason Purdy didn't like company." Frank grasped one of the young trees that had sprung up next to the stone fence. In a moment he had shined up higher than the wall. The tree bent with Frank's weight, swinging him clear of the dangerous glass. Then Frank dropped to the ground on the other side, and the tree snapped back into place. "Come ahead," he directed Joe in a whisper. In a moment, Joe was beside Frank, crouching among the bushes along the inside of the wall. The rumble of thunder was closer now. A brief white flicker passed over the black sky, showing the bottoms of thick clouds and the big Purdy mansion off to the left. Creeping slowly and carefully through the dark brush, no longer daring to talk to each other, the two young sleuths gained the open yard in front of the house. They halted at its edge. By now, the rumble in the sky had given way to cracking, booming thunder. A gusty wind was rushing through the leafy trees over their heads. Flickers of lightning, some bright and some faint, played across the open sky and caused weird momentary shadows on the walls and roof of the silent mansion. The storm was about to strike. "Listen!" Frank clutched Joe's arm. "Sounded like someone running." The brothers strained their hearing to the utmost. Despite the strong wind, the thunder, and the sharp patter of raindrops hitting the leaves like a shower of pebbles, Frank and Joe could hear footsteps. Someone was running, not now stepping on a dead branch, now kicking a stone. A tall man's silhouette crossed the open space in front of the boys and mounted the porch. There, a flash of lightning revealed him, bent a little, inserting a key in the lock. "Dalrymple," breathed Joe in amazement. "Are you sure? We warned him to keep away from here. Seems to be having trouble getting in." The man was turning the key and pulling on the knob. Finally, the door opened and he went inside. Expectantly, the boys waited in the rain, which had begun to fall in a heavy rush. To their surprise, the house remained in darkness. "Why doesn't he turn on a light?" Joe muttered impatiently. "Is he afraid somebody will see it? He said he owned the house. Why should he care?" "Maybe it isn't Dalrymple." "Sure looked like him. I got a glimpse of his face. Same build, too. Funny we didn't hear a car coming in. He must have gotten here before we did." "Well, he must know the place pretty well to move around inside without a light," Frank observed. "Unless," he suggested, "he has gone up to the secret room." "Or maybe something's happened to him," Joe said in concern. "The secret room was where he found those threatening messages. The person who wrote the notes might have been waiting for him." Alarmed for the safety of their client, the boys started to make a rush for the house. But Frank stopped abruptly. "Hold on," he cautioned. "That man might not be Dalrymple. He could be the person who's been threatening him. This fellow seemed very calm as he went in. You remember how nervous Dalrymple was? Let's wait and see." "Okay," Joe agreed, "but if it isn't Dalrymple, I'd like to know what his game is." The boys waited by the edge of the brush while the rain, illuminated by lightning, fell in silver sheets. "Shh!" signaled Joe suddenly. "I heard something. Footsteps again." As the boys listened, they were startled by a light suddenly turned on in a large room with a bay window. "Come on," Frank urged. Bending low to avoid being seen, the boys raced across the lawn. The rain pelted their backs, drenching them. In a moment, Frank and Joe reached the side of the house and stood under the lighted bay window. Here the Hardys were sheltered from the rain and invisible to anyone in the room. Cautiously, they moved underneath one of the smaller windows in the bay. Frank made a cradle of his hands. Joe stepped into it with one foot and was hoisted up. Warily, Joe raised his head above the sill. "What do you see?" Frank hissed. "A living room. The overstuffed furniture's covered with sheets. Walls are paneled. Big glass chandelier. Nobody's there." "Who turned on the light?" "Could be the storm caused a temporary power failure and the current just came back on," Joe surmised. "Where's Dalrymple, or whoever it is we saw? What else is in the room?" "Big heavy doors, and wow! An enormous grandfather's clock near one corner. Glass front with a swinging brass pendulum. I can hear the clock ticking from here." "Ticking?" Frank repeated, shifting under Joe's weight. "A clock ticking in a vacant house?" The same thought flashed through the brothers' minds at once. "Death while the clock ticks," was the second threatening message Mr. Dalrymple had received. "Let me look," Frank said eagerly, and Joe dropped to the ground. They quickly reversed positions. "I wonder who started the clock and when," Frank said quietly. "It's the right time," he added, glancing at his wristwatch. Suddenly, as Frank peered in, the room was plunged into darkness once more. In the same instant, the whole house was lit up by a vivid sheet of lightning. A resounding clap of thunder smashed directly overhead. Then, an unearthly, blood-curdling scream rang out from within the mansion. End of chapter 4. Also, there's a picture in this chapter, so I'm just going to briefly show it to you. Warily Joe raised his head above the sill.